From the vise of Jason Yeager comes the 409 Yeager, a high floating hopper and attractor pattern that we've come to rely on in the summer months. Hey everyone, Matt here with the Northern Angler in Traverse City, Michigan. You can find all the materials for this fly and lots more at thenorthernangler.com. The 409 Yeager is a fairly simple hopper pattern that you can find in our boxes from late June through September. I go to this fly when I want a smaller, more subtle footprint than a chubby and a fly that floats well in riffle type water. Commercially, these are available in yellow and purple, but I'd encourage you to experiment and find some color schemes that do well in your fisheries. All right, we're gonna start with the hook securely in the vise. This is the TMC 5262. It's a great 2X heavy, 2X long hook. I like using a little bit heavier hook on these foam hopper patterns. It just helps things keel and land and stay upright the way it's supposed to be. I'm gonna wrap my thread. This is Veevus 50 denier gel spun, by the way. I'm gonna wrap back to the barb. So I'm past the point, I'm now at the barb. I'm gonna grab my foam. This is two-tone foam that I have created myself. I used MFC's high-rise foam and I glued 1mm black to 2mm purple. I used the beaver tail cutter here, which looks like this. A little slicer. Makes things really easy and consistent. You can use a Chernobyl cutter or even cut it yourself, whatever works for you. I will tell you, if you're using the beaver tail cutter, go a size up. So I'm using a size 10 hook here. This is a size 8 cutter. Just gives you that nice, good looking overlap. I'll set this down so there's overlap over the head. That's really what I'm looking at, not so much the tail. I know there will be some. I'm putting 3-4 wraps on the foam and then a few on the shank. That's just gonna help with spinning. It's gonna happen eventually. It's not a big deal. And wet that thread. This is really slick thread, so a little bit of moisture when you're doing the dubbing can go a long way. Tight dubbing noodle here, and really less is more. Ice dub is really easy to overdo, so I'm just going to noodle this up. We're not going crazy with this, but I am going to wrap back, try and tuck some in there, and we're going to do one more little chunk. And you'll notice this is a down eye hook. Really helpful when you're doing these overlapping, these heads that kind of go over the front of the hook. It's just going to help you thread that hook. I promise you, I've done the straight eye. It's not very fun. All right, I'm going to finish up my dubbing here, and I'm right about 1/3 of the hook shank back if you split this into thirds. Fold this down. I'm going to push down on it with my thumb so there's not too much of a hump. Same thing I did before, 3-4 wraps, and then to the shank. That just helps it not spin too much. And then I'm just going to take wraps going forward right up to the eye. I'm going to cover this foam with thread wraps. I'm going to create kind of this runway, if you will, for our crystal flash, our elk hair, our poly wing, and our hackle. Kind of everything is going to fit into this one spot. Next thing I'm going to add is some crystal flash. We're just using pearl here. I'm going to use a single strand. I'm going to double this over, so I'm folding it, trim that loop, and then I'm going to do it one more time. Double that, so you should have 4 strands now. Now I'm going to fold this over the thread, and the trick here is to not start right up against this bump. I want to start about midway. That way I have enough to back up on, and that gives me the space to wrap back on it. And that's nice and splayed out thanks to that foam bump there. Fold that back. I'm going to trim it right at the back of the foam. Great. Next we're going to use some bull elk I really like natural bull elk. It just looks good. It's got those nice short, well-defined tips. We're not going to use too much, but I still need to pull out all this fluff. If you have a nice little comb, I'll make this nice and fast. Great. This isn't a huge fly, so we're not using a ton. No need to make this a top-heavy, overdressed fly. I'm going to use my small Dr. Slick stacker here. Small one actually just keeps me from using too much hair. It kind of reminds me how much I can get away with. A few taps. Stacking that. We're aligning all the tips. And if we do it right, it should look like that. Don't let those get away from me there. All right, work those. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to measure to the back of the foam again. Makes it nice and easy. Consistent measurement spot. Loose wrap, tighten down. I'm not reefing on this. I'm just giving it just enough pressure. It's going to splay that elk hair out, and I just really do not want to cut through the foam. That will not work well. Lift your butts up. Cut as close to the foam as you can without cutting your thread. And really, I'm just going to come through here and trim some butts. Some of these end up cleaner than others. They all catch fish, so don't worry about it too much. Just tie it and fish it. And I'm going to take wraps just to cover this up. I want to try and wrap back on this elk hair so it's set against that foam bump there, and that really splays it up, gives it a nice visible wing. Great. I'm going to move my thread to the middle one more time, and I'm going to use some white EP fibers. I love EP fibers. I think they're just super friendly to use. They're not on a card, which is great. Now I'm going to tie one half of this close to me, wrap back on it, and wrap forward, and then fold it, and you get this nice V wing. I'm actually going to create a nice little ramped runway for my hackle. Okay, looks good. Tension this. I'm going to trim it right even with those tips. Looks great. Cover any of those butts left. You can comb this out if you want. Usually looks pretty good on its own. Next, we're going to add some legs. Now, the commercial version of this fly has a white and black leg. I think more purple is always good. So we're going to go with a purple and black rubber leg. And I am just wrapping on top of this so that one end comes out at the head and one comes out at the back. And then I'm going to do one more. And we're going to leave these long. I'm going to trim them at the end. I just like trimming the legs at the end. I think it helps with getting the proportions right. So I'll fold it, put it on there. I'm tensioning with my left hand. Helps keep that rubber compressed. Wrap forward. Make sure everything's aligned, sticking forward. Great. And see, we've covered up that runway really well. I'm going to grab my hackle. This is from a Whiting 100 pack. They're so friendly. You don't have to size these out. Just grab your hackle, tie it in, and wrap it. It's great. Prep it a little bit. I trim some hackle close to the stem. Just makes it really easy to tie in. Capture that stem. Work it right up against that poly wing. Trim your stem out. This one's being a little stubborn. That happens, that's okay. Just don't trim your thread or your legs. And then last step before we wrap the hackle, I'm gonna add a little bit of dubbing. And this is for a few reasons. One, I wanna cover these thread wraps up. Two, hackle tends to slip less when you give it something to bite into like dubbing. Remember, this thread is really slick. I really don't want to fight my hackle. So really, really thin dubbing noodle. Again, even thinner if you can than we were tying on before. I'm gonna wrap back. I'm just kind of open space this. And I really want to get that back section. And then the forward wraps are just gonna cover up anything I missed. Covered up, looks good. Bring your thread to the front. And then these hackles are so nice. They're so nice and long, easy to wrap. Just don't trap your legs or that poly wing. We're gonna do some nice, tight hackle wraps. Makes this fly super buoyant. I usually end up with 5 or 6 wraps. And to tie this off, I'm putting wraps behind and in front, and I'm alternating. And I'm kind of wiggling my thread back and forth. That's so I don't trap too many fibers. Back, really take your time trimming this hackle. And any extra you might have trapped, again, trying to cut those legs. This one's looking pretty good. Time to tie off. I like a really big whip finish if I can. Just helps you work with those legs and this hackle and this foam. You can get a few different size whip finishes. Just mind these legs. I'm doing a wiggle here, trying not to trap hackle. And I'll do 1 or 2 whip finishes. This thread is really thin. Again, like I said, it's great. Thin and strong. Reach in, tie that off, and any leftover fibers. Last thing to do is our legs. Sweep those rear legs back. I trim those just beyond the foam. And then I sweep the front legs back and trim them the same length as the back. And then just a little bit more. And I actually use this barring on these legs to help stay consistent in terms of length. There we go. That's the 409 Yeager, another fly that belongs in your summer trout box. Grab the materials list and tie some up. Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and we'll see you soon in the shop or out on the water.